series, which will give you, as I say, where the Archbishop's mind was anchored, a summary of the errors of the full-modern world, which has been around for quite a while. It's ridiculous to think that the problem started with the Council, the problem simply exploded with the Council. The long-standing problem came to a head with the Council. Moderate rationalism, which is more dangerous, less extreme, but more dangerous than absolute rationalism. 8. Reason is as high as religion. Notice, no longer reason completely dominates, but reason is as high as. It's moderate, but it's still rotten. So philosophy is as high as theology. Philosophy is the purely human mind working on reality, as much as it can grasp reality. Theology is a mind illuminated by the faith, way above reason. So he's now saying that to say that reason is philosophy is as high as theology is to say is as much as is to say in a slightly more moderate form that nothing overtops my human reason. 9. All dogmas come within nature. That's simply ridiculous, and within the scope of natural reason. Well, just take the Holy Eucharist. I mean, what reason can get hold of, I say again, God being substantially, truly, and really present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, beneath a little piece of bread and a little few drops of wine? Absurd to say that comes within reason. Notice 10. Any philosopher may choose personally to submit to an authority, like the Church, but philosophy cannot. So again, it's more moderate, it's more cunning, it's more slimy. So if philosophy, the pure, noble pursuit of itself, cannot submit to authority, but if any philosopher wants to, well, that's his personal affair. He goes to church on Sunday, and he wants to submit his mind to the Church. All right, silly man. But philosophy, no, there's no way that can submit to the Church. False distinction, of course. The Church should tolerate errors of philosophy and allow it to correct itself. No. What is philosophy? Philosophy is the human mind working on reality. Not just material reality, but non-material realities as well. Any natural reality being worked on by the natural mind, that's philosophy. And so that must not submit to anything above. The Church should tolerate errors of philosophy and allow it to correct itself. The problem is, again, original sin. With original sin, the philosophy will not be able to work out its own errors. It needs the Church to come in and say, when you say we all evolved from monkeys, you're talking nonsense. There's no way that the human spiritual soul can have evolved from monkeys. No way. Evolution is nonsense in that form. The Church the Church cannot tolerate errors of philosophy, because philosophy is liable. At its most glamorous, it sweeps people's minds with it, and it gets into the most terrible errors because of original sin. And if it tries to correct itself, it can't. It's not going to be able to correct itself. On evolution, for instance, the Church is needed to, again, not interfere with philosophy's own workings, but definitely to condemn stupidities that come out of the workings of philosophy. That definitely the Church can do. The Church must do. So the Church can't lead philosophy to correct its own errors, because it's not going to do that. The Church will condemn the errors overflowing, but at the same time it will lead philosophy to do its own work. The Church will have a respect for philosophy doing properly its own work, but it will condemn stupidities coming out of it. Rome hindered, and then free science, of course, the same thing. Rome hinders the free progress of science. That's simply nonsense. There would be no modern science without St. Thomas Aquinas' marvellous grip on all reality. And now that the Church has no more control over science, because the scientists reject all control of science, the scientists are getting into most awful nonsense, because it's got no check on it. And so the devil reaps havoc with the poor little scientists' minds when they've not got the church to correct them. So the church, firstly, generated modern science. Modern science is a spin-off from the truth, of the huge truth established by the church and by her philosophy, in sync with her philosophy, her theology, especially from the Scholastics and St. Thomas Aquinas onwards. And secondly, the church is absolutely needed ever since then to correct the wild, crazy theories that science without the church can get into. So Rome does not hinder the free progress of science, not at all. That's a modern Masonic myth generated from the example of Galileo. Galileo was a jumped-up jackass who Bellamy tried to calm down and not to stop him saying stupidities. But Galileo insisted upon his theories. To this day, it's not certain that the Earth circulates around the Sun. If scientists pretend that it's certain, apparently it's not so. I've never gone into the question, but it's not as certain as the modern scientists pretend. Scholastic 13, scholastic philosophy is out of date. It's only out of date in certain details because of the superior knowledge of phenomena that modern man has, thanks to microscopes, for instance. The Middle Ages didn't have microscopes, and therefore Aristotle thought that there was, when meat went rotten, apparently with no cause, with no outer cause. Aristotle had to make his theory to fit that. But thanks to modern science and modern microscopes, it's now known that it's little bacteria that turn into worms that rot meat. But the little bacteria, whatever it is there, I don't know the details. But the little causes of rot are all actually already there. The rot is not coming from nowhere, it's coming from, and that's thanks to microscopes. And it's there, and therefore, if Aristotle was alive today, he would no longer have to punch a hole in his major theory in order to explain rotting meat. The modern explanation, thanks to modern microscopes, fits entirely with the rest of the theory of Aristotle, and therefore he wouldn't have needed to make an exception. For spontaneous generation, I think it's called. Without microscopes, you cannot see the organisms arriving at the meat to rot it. Therefore, you assume that you can't see the organisms in the meat, you can't see them arriving in the meat, therefore you have to have a theory of spontaneous generation. That theory is no longer needed because now you can observe the little bacteria which are responsible for that rotting. Scholastic philosophy is not the hindrance of science, it's the very foundation of modern science. Without modern science, modern science would never have followed Plato. Because Plato says the material reality is not all that real. Aristotle says material reality is for real. And the church took the power side of Aristotle, ever since Scholasticism and so on. So the church is not in for science. Philosophical questioning need take no heed of supernatural revelation. Again, that's another form of saying that philosophy should be independent of theology. It's not true because natural reality is entirely in sync with supernatural reality. It's got no notion of supernatural reality. Natural research has no notion of supernatural reality, and therefore natural reason has an only incomplete grip on supernatural, even on natural reality, and therefore it needs supernatural revelation. 15, 16, 17, a ring, meaning they're important. Number one is ring, they're especially called freedom of conscience. We move from in principle to practice. Actually, every man is free to choose his own religion is a vast principle, but it's a principle applying to action. Therefore, in principle, ideas in practice. In the church and in the world. In the church, 15, every man is free to choose his own religion. Well, he's as free to choose his own religion as he is free to murder his grandmother. If I'm a strong guy and my grandmother is frail and I've got a dagger in my hand, I'm going to finish her off one way or the other. I've got the physical ability, I've got the freedom to do it in that sense. I'm free to do evil in the sense that I have the physical freedom to do it, and I've got the free will to do it, but I don't have the right to do it. Every man is free to choose his own religion. He has, just like he's free to murder, in the sense in which he's free to murder his grandmother, but nobody has the right to murder his grandmother, and nobody has the right to choose his own religion. He's not got moral freedom. He's got physical freedom to murder his grandmother, but he hasn't got moral freedom. Any religion enables men to save their souls, in no way Jose. If a Hindu saves his soul, it's thanks to the truth, any truth remaining inside the Hindu religion, which he holds on to, and then the grace of Jesus Christ, which enables him to hold on to that truth and to be ready to believe the rest of Catholic truth if it was told him or revealed or explained to him. But otherwise, it's absolutely not by Hinduism that any Hindu can save his soul. It's only by the grace of Jesus Christ that any man can get there or save his soul. Can men be saved outside Catholicism? Exceptionally, yes. Normally, no. 17. One may always hope for the salvation of non-Catholics. Wow. One may always hope for the salvation of non-Catholics. One may only exceptionally hope for the salvation. One may always hope, no, exceptionally. That's tough. But that's what the Church says. That's why it's so important that's why there were always Catholic missionaries, in the hope of carrying the true faith to these peoples. The Archbishop was always deeply impressed by the effect that the Catholicizing of the African pagans, the glorious effects that the Catholic faith had upon these poor pagans. And interestingly, he used to say, he was a missionary, he was in Africa, he was speaking from experience. He said, it's not so much the sins of impurity. He said, the sins of hatred just as much. He said, in Africa, until the Catholic faith arrives, every man hates somebody else. It's this village that hates that village, it's this area that hates that area, it's this family that hates this family. Hate, hate, hate. Until the Catholic faith comes, then they learn to love their fellow men. They don't naturally love their fellow men. They naturally hate some fellow men. So the salvation of non-Catholics is a really risky affair without the Catholic faith. And that's why when young men were taught the Catholic faith and young sisters were taught, young women were taught the Catholic faith, that's why they became missionaries to go to these far lands and in the hope of saving souls. Protestantism 18 is part of the true religion and it enables men to please God. The Church, the Catholic says, no. Protestantism is not as good as that. Protestantism, there can be good Protestants, but it's despite their Protestantism. It's not because of their Protestantism. Protestantism is bad news. The 17 and 18 are tough, but that's the truth of the matter. How many Protestants? I was talking to a good, undoubtedly good person, a German Protestant woman. She's in an advanced age. She must be around 70. She's a decent person. She's a revisionist. She hates the lies of the modern world. She's undoubtedly got quite a bit of grace. But she's resisting Catholic truth. She's running into it because she came and visited me, because I'm a revisionist. Revision is a friendship that arose over revisionism. And the fact that she hates the big lie definitely puts her in line to receive some grace. She loves truth, but she's resisting Catholic truth. She said she had an uncle, a Catholic priest who was an uncle, and she often talked to him. She was in contact with him. She told me this last time. She's a good soul, but I don't know whether she will save her soul. Protestantism is not as good as that, even a good, decent person like her. She said, I'm not conscious of sin. And undoubtedly she's not committed apparently many major sins, but what about that first command? She may not have broken the 6th and 9th commands. I would think she hasn't. Broadly, not even very little. But the first command, and the third command, She goes to the, she told me this time, she goes to the Protestant service, but she realizes the service is nonsense. She realizes the Protestant pastor is all over the place, like the modern Catholic priest. Probably not as bad as the modern conciliar priests. But, and obviously the thing is tugging at her. I hope it goes on tugging at her. But she needs to be tugged at, because she dies in the present state. She's a good soul, but is she good enough to save her soul? Do I have the right to hope that she will save her soul? The syllabus says no. That's how important the Catholic faith is. Okay, we move on. Okay, now look at 1 and 2 together, because now we move into morals. And morals divide into section 5, section 6, section 7, section 8. The limitation of the church rights, the church being, and that of course is absolutely the 19th century, the fight of the Freemasons against the church. The church rights limited. 6, Roman figure 6, on page 2. The state rights unlimited. Roman figure 7, natural and Christian ethics. And a special section of its own, I was saying to you, Roman figure 8, marriage. Special section on the errors of marriage, because that's the 20th stitch which the Masons were undoing in order to be able to arrive at divorce, abortion, euthanasia, you name it, child molestation, pedophilia, all of these things flow. The marriage, somebody's compared to an atom. If you smash the atom, there's an incredible explosive force let loose. If you smash the family, there's incredible explosive force let loose to destroy society and destroy human beings who need a proper, well-constituted family. Okay, let's have a look. Church rights limited, first. Again, cramp the church, straitjacket the church, so that the humankind will be left vulnerable. If it's not protected by the church, morals and the family and natural life will be laid wide open to attack by the devil. So you're going to cramp the church firstly, section 5, and then you're going to attack, let loose the state, 6, liberate ethics, 7, and liberate marriage, 8. The principles of, and then the principles of limiting, 19 and 20, very important. The principles are always the most important, 19 and 20, and then a stack of applications of the principle, limiting doctrine, worldly power, communications, immunity, and so on and so on. That's all details, but it's precious details. It's kind of out of date in a way, but it's nevertheless very illuminating to see how the Freemasons crammed the church. 19. The church is not a perfect society. The state defines her rights. I said yesterday, remember, a perfect society is one that has within itself all it needs to fulfill its own functions. So the Masons are pretending that the church does not have all it needs in itself. The church needs the state. Error. The state is a perfect society. It has in itself to achieve its purposes. It does not have, the state does not have in itself everything necessary to save souls. Only the church has that. But it does have everything necessary in itself to organize natural society. So the church is not a perfect society. It needs the state, and the state defines her rights. Terrible error. 20. The church may exercise authority only as allowed by the state. Again, you see the subordination of the church to the state, the subordination of God to man, the subordination of the supernatural society to the natural society, the subordination of grace to nature, putting man, nature above God and above grace. Terrible errors. Limits as to doctrine. So the church, the state, is going to presume to tell the church what's true and false. The church cannot define that it is the true church. Of course the church, the Catholic Church, endowed, created, instituted, illuminated by our Lord Jesus Christ, the one and only God-man, of course that church can state it's the only true church. But the state is going to say it can't. The church cannot define that it is the true church. Catholic teachers and writers are bound only by defined dogmas. That's a modern error, because it's admitting that Catholic teachers and writers are bound by defining dogmas. It's admitting that. That's why it's a moderate error. But it's then saying that outside of defining dogma, Catholic teachers and writers can say and think what they like. No. Because the Church teaches, and with a great force, and with a great, much more than just define everything in the ordinary magisterium, without being defined, is yet pretty seriously true, like the wrongness of artificial means of birth control. I think Paul VI did not solemnly define the wrongness of artificial means of birth control. The Church has always taught it, it's part of the ordinary magisterium, it's infallible, but it's not defined. So, etc. Popes, 23, popes and church councils have both erred in doctrine, and they've overstepped their bounds. Well, you can find popes making mistakes, like John the 22nd, defining that a soul, the souls don't enjoy beatitude until the general judgment. That's an error. And John the 22nd stated it, but he made a mistake. But he wasn't teaching in faith and morals. He wasn't teaching infallibly. They've overstepped their bounds. Well, perhaps here or there exceptionally, but definitely not generally. 24. The Church has no worldly power, we're back to Quanta Cura, and may not use force. That was error M. The Church cannot temporarily punish. M in Quanta Cura. The Church may not use force. No, it may use force, but it will often not use force, but it may use it. 25. Bishops have a worldly power which is granted by the state and therefore revocable by the state. Once again, putting the Church under the control of the state. If the power of bishops comes from the state, obviously the state can take it back. The state does not give the bishops their power. It's the Church that gives the bishops their power. You can see the Masons constantly encroaching upon the rights and privileges of the state in order to limit the state. Popes, bishops and priests, 27, must have no care of worldly things nor any worldly authority. No, they will need some care of worldly things. The Church will need to own the local mass centre, the property of the local mass centre. Otherwise, if the mass centre still belongs to the laity are liable to try to tell the priest what to do. It often won't happen, but it's liable to happen. So the Church, this SSPX, insists that the laity hand over the property to the SSPX, and now the SSPX is going crazy. But what's that? That is to say that accidentally, the lay control of lay property may turn out to be a blessing, like in the present today's circumstances of the SSPX. But as a principle, it's wrong for the laity to control property used by the Church. So in practice, it may occasionally be okay, but in principle, it's wrong. Michael?
I was just going to say that the Archbishop himself advised several people back in the day
yes.
to purchase property themselves, turn it into mass centres, develop them,
and hold on to the property.
Yeah.
Well, the Archbishop is foreseeing what's happening today.
Yeah, but it was necessary at the time as well, because of, for whatever reasons. But we've seen recently, last year in fact, wasn't it, that the Archbishop's former chauffeur, Max Barret,
yes,
he was taken to court by Bishop Kelly.
Yes.
And he who shall remain nameless, and we tried to steal the property from him.
That's it.
And they lost in court.
That's it. And Monsieur Barry was right to hold on to the property, as is now clear.
Okay.
So, you know...
But we locked him out of his own property.
That's it. I mean, it's unbelievable. Unbelievable. But there it is. So, you know, every principle allows of exceptions. But exceptions don't make good principles. That's the point. Every principle must allow exceptions, but exceptions make bad principles. Hard cases make bad law. So the general law stands, the Church does need to own property. It's absolutely wrong to say that the Church should never own property. 27. 28. Bishops may not publish letters from the Pope without the state's permission. That's a key point, because yesteryear, today the internet, everything's going to get everywhere. But yesteryear, when communications were more controllable locally, the states tried to stop the bishops from promulgating what the Pope was saying, because the Pope has tremendous power, authority, and if the bishops published a letter coming from the Pope, it had the Pope's authority, not just the bishop behind it. So the state tried to stop the bishops from publishing what the Pope was saying. This especially applied in France, because the Pope was against Gallicanism, the French bishops, the French laity, the French Catholics, saying, we in France know best, to hell with Rome. And so they would not, and so the state tried to stop the French bishops from using the authority of the Pope to say what Rome wanted. They tried this. It goes together with the age. The Pope may grant no favours not asked for by the state, again putting the state above the Pope. Clerical immunity, more details. The immunity of church and clerics arose from the civil law. The immunity of church and clerics from civil law was a gift of civil law. No, it's a gift of the church. It's in the church's nature that priests' crimes should not be tried in the civil court. But of course that depends upon them definitely being tried in an ecclesiastical court. A wise state won't mind leaving the church to settle her priest's problems as long as the church does settle her priest's problems. What bugs common sense, bugs all the heck out of common sense, is when the paedophiliac priests are protected from persecution by the church, like it hasn't been going on today. That's when the state reasonably has an objection. But as long as the church was doing its function of disciplining its own priests, then the state wouldn't mind if the church insisted on its own courts. But it is reasonable and proper that, for instance, the clergy should be tried only in church courts. Church courts for worldly cases involving clerics must be abolished. No, because it's a question of protecting the common good, protecting the prestige of the clergy. If a priest, let's say, misbehaves, and everybody knows it, and he quietly disappears from circulation, okay, he quietly disappears, the priests don't lose the priestly prestige, but he does disappear, the church is looking after business. The cleric's immunity from military service may and should be done away with. Normally clerics should not go into military service, because a seminarian should not be taught how to kill. A seminary, ultimately, military service is about learning how to kill. Killing is not the business of the priests. It is the business of somebody. Somebody's got to kill, if necessary, to defend the good of the state from aggression, for instance. Somebody's got to kill it. It shouldn't be the priests. But the French state enlisted the clergy in the First World War, for instance. That's absolutely against church law. The church authority, the 33, has no exclusive right to teach theology. Of course it has, because the teaching of theology goes with the grace of the priesthood. The priests understand theology in a way in which the best of laymen can't understand theology. A good layman can get a good grip on theology, but there's a certain, it's my little experience, there's a certain grace that even the best of laymen don't have to understand theology and to teach it. You don't expect priests to be able to teach about engineering, but there's a special grace which the priests do have. 34. The Pope being monarch of the universal church is a medieval idea. So the Freemasons are wanting to do away with the control of the Pope and the prestige of the Pope. But the papacy is a monarchy. It's not a democracy of the church. It is a monarchy. On the other hand, our Lord was not a democrat. But no, the people never had a better friend than our Lord. The church is not democratic, but the people never had a better friend than the Catholic Church when she's in her right mind, because she looks after the people both in this life and in the next to make sure they get to heaven. 35. A general council or popular act could move the papacy from Rome to anywhere. An act of the people or a general council. No, whether the papacy is Providence is wanted the papacy in Rome. The Avignon, there was a little while during the Middle Ages when the papacy moved from Rome to France. It was not a good idea because the moment the papacy moved to France, it came under the French monarchy. The French monarchy had a special influence on it. The papacy moving away from Rome was a punishment of the unfaithfulness of Rome, but it was restored. St. Catherine of Siena was her special mission was to get the Pope to come back to Rome, which he finally did, and the papacy has been in Rome ever since. At the end of the world, we know that Rome is going to lose the faith. The Antichrist, the Rome will be the seat of the Antichrist. Probably. But that again is an exception which doesn't make a good principle. Once again, hard case to make that law. Rome is where God wants the papacy to be. 36. A national council can make definitions. A national council, I presume, of the church. I think the error is that a French national council could make definitions. Nonsense. And the state can insist on them. Nonsense. The definitions can only come from the supreme authority of the church, from the Pope in Rome until Rome loses the faith, exceptionally.
It's like the church in China at the moment, they have sort of a state control of Catholics.
Yes, that's it. That's a good example. The national church in China is off the wall. Accidentally, the national church in China has kept Tridentine Mass. But now it's under pressure from Rome. Since Rome said, oh, you're not so bad as all that, let's make it up. And the national church in China said, okay, well, let's make it up. Well, in that case, you're going to take the new Mass. It's unbelievable. The whole thing. It's such a mess today. And now the SSPX is in a mess. I mean, who can blame poor Catholics for going bananas today?
Why do we look subject to the national church in China?
Sorry. Somebody else? Anthony, go on.
Yeah, on the subject of the national church in China, Father Kimball, I think, gave a talk in a sermon at Oxford, they said that they had doubtful orders or valid orders because when the bishops were forced to consecrate, they left something out.
Possible. Father Campbell knows something more about that than I do. By the way, Father Campbell was definitely against the agreement. So he's on track there. The state can insist that national churches can get out from under the Pope in Rome. Nonsense. The Pope's 38. The Pope's exaggerated claims were partly responsible for the Orthodox schism. That's an error. That's an error. Generally, if you look at each of these questions, undoubtedly there's this little provocation here, there's a provocation there, there's an error here, there's an error there on the part of the Catholic clergy. But when it comes to settling these grand questions, I think what you find if you observe, look at the history, look at the details, what you find is that the Catholic Church was extremely reasonable. The Catholic Church went 9 yards to try to accommodate people that were disagreeing with it. But then there came a point where the Catholic Church could say, no, we can't go in, we can make these concessions, but no more. And if you look at it, it's reasonable what the Church said. What the Church officially said. There may be this misdemeanor, that misdemeanor, this exaggeration, that exaggeration, or this or that clergyman, this or that bishop, this or that pope. But when it came to the official settlement, for instance, Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, who supposedly had a lot of little babies scattered all over Rome because he was a naughty boy, nevertheless, when it came to official business, he was a good pope. He made good decisions for the church. His private life didn't bear examination. Again, the liberals blow up all his errors and make him into a horrible pope. But actually, I think if you look at the history of it, I'm not a historian, I'm not a church historian, but I think if you look at the history of it, he was a very reasonable pope. When he was acting officially, he was very reasonable. Okay, we move on to state rights unlimited. 39. The principles, the applications, the conclusions. Again, the principles are important. As all right comes from the state rights are unrestricted. No. The state is only the state. It's got nothing to do with the supernatural, which is above the natural. The church teaching is opposed to the good of human society. That's lunacy. Absolute lunacy. Nothing looks after human society better than the Catholic Church when the Catholic Church is free to do so. It's left free to do so. But men don't leave it free. They want to tie it in knots like the Freemasons. 41. Even a non-Catholic state has a right over sacred things. Exequatur means let it be carried out, let it be performed. When the state can grant, when a non-Catholic state can grant, has a right over what Catholics are allowed to, nonsense. 42. A very important principle. If church and state law conflict, state law prevails. No. Again, so long as Rome is in its right mind, and there's a clash of the laws, you could appeal to Rome. And for years, centuries and centuries, the Roman decisions would be reasonable. The Catholic people submitted to the local priest, because if the priest went bananas, they could appeal to the Pope, the bishop. If the bishop went bananas, they could appeal to the nuncio. If the nuncio went bananas, they could appeal to the Pope. There were a lot of safety mechanisms built into the church hierarchy and church structure. But now, you appeal to Rome and you get nonsense. After the Second Vatican Council, there were many priests that were all ends up. And they, in the name of justice, they tried to, good priests wanted to celebrate the Mass, so they were being oppressed and thrown out by their bishop. They appealed to Rome, and Rome sided with the bishop. That's because Rome has gone crazy. But for centuries and centuries and centuries, Rome was sensible. Rome was just. It took time, but Rome would eventually decide on the side of justice. You could always appeal and appeal again. In the society, there's no appeal. In 2006, because of a problem in 2004, in 2006, the society decreed that there's no appeal to an order of the Superior General. It's not Catholic. There seemed to be at that point in time no alternative. But it's not Catholic for there to be no appeal. That's an intrinsic difficulty of the situation of the SSPX. And now, of course, since there's no appeal, the society is going crazy because the Superior's gone crazy. How could you avoid it? Problem of the times.
What was the reason for that, Lord?
Sorry?
What was the reason for that?
The Lageria affair. The Lageria affair in 2004. Because Lageria tried to appeal to Rome against Bishop Furley. He had his reasons for appealing. But it couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. And in fairness, I think Bishop Furley at that time tried to get some kind of mechanism with Rome set up. But you can't appeal to the wolf to protect the sheep. And so he couldn't go to Rome. And therefore, the poor little old society said, there can't be an appeal against the Superior General. You can understand in the crazy circumstances. You can understand. But now that rule that there's no appeal against the Superior General means the whole total society is going crazy. Incredible. We must move on. The state may nullify or alter concordats regardless of Rome's wishes. Concordat is an agreement made between the church and the state, whereby the church, renounces some of its privileges, its normal and natural privileges, in return for the state guaranteeing certain liberties to the church. Well, the state, the Masons say, the state can fool around. Once concordat has been fixed, the state can fool around with it. No. The state may interfere, 44, in matters of religious, moral, or pastoral. No. Education. Notice there are 4 errors on education, 45, 46, 47, 48, because the Masons know how important education is, and the church knows how important education is. It's the formation of the next generation, or getting to the children. So the Masons say all direction of schools in a Christian state should come under the state and no longer under the church. And the state does its best to kick the church out of education. Criminal. Even in church seminaries, the method of studies comes under the state. That's simply ridiculous. What on earth does the state know about the formation of priests? It's incapable. But there you are, that's 47. It is good for society if all public schools come under the state and not under the church. Crazy. Because only the church can form youngsters, form the ideas of youngsters to get to heaven. The state is incapable of believing in heaven as such, or organizing or knowing how to teach so as to get children to think of heaven and to organize their lives with an idea of getting to heaven. 48. Catholics may approve of an essentially naturalist education for worldly ends. That's a huge error. But a lot of Catholic parents think, if I've got a good naturalist school, if I've got a school with good science teachers, good language teachers, good mathematics teachers, then it's a good school and I can put my child in there. No, because because if there's no teaching about how to get to heaven, the children are naturally going to grow up thinking just of how to get a good job with plenty of money and how to make it in this life. They're not going to learn how to make it for the next life. It's a disaster to put children in a school where they're not going to be thinking of the next life. It's not enough. You can't say, this is a good school, therefore accept your exception. I was in a very good Protestant school, Winchester College. That's not a boast, it was my parents who put me there, who chose it and put me there. But it was a good school. There was no idea of the faith. Interestingly, a lot of it is in sync with the faith. But I never learned anything about the Catholic faith at that school. Nothing. I learned what I picked up afterwards was in sync, because Winchester College was originally a Catholic school founded by a bishop, William of Wykeham. And it was founded for the formation of priests. And so a lot of things that I picked up at school are in sync with the seminary when I came to the seminary later. But I never learned anything about getting to heaven at Winchester. Not a thing. Good school though it was. And I'm very grateful for the naturalist education that I got there. But it was only a naturalist education. We must move on. The state may cut off, after education, 49, 50, 51 bishops. Again, notice the importance of education, the importance of bishops. 49. The state may cut off bishops from the people, and it may cut off bishops and people from the Pope. No. The communication between Pope and bishops and people has got to be left free so that the church can do its work for the salvation of souls, and the state may not interfere. The state can put bishops into desired dioceses before the Pope does so. You may remember, if you know a little church history, the tremendous arguments that there were, the investiture dispute in the Middle Ages between who appoints the bishops. Who appoints the bishops is crucial. Crucial. Because the bishops are crucial inside the church. A good bishop, enormous good effect. Bad bishop, enormous bad effect. The bishops are where it's at. As we have the Archbishop saying that in one of the things I was reading. The state can dismiss bishops and create bishoprics and bishops. It's just nonsense. The state can fix we move on to the state, the religious institutes. Again, those are very important. The monasteries and the convents are very important. So the Masons try to interfere with that. The state can fix the age of the religious profession, and it can bar from religious vows. Interesting how the Masons hate religious vows. Because they know the power of religious vows to stabilize religious vocation, and they know the power of religious vocation. A faithful monk's prayers, or a faithful nun's prayers, do a great deal of damage to the devil. And so the devil has his Freemasons trying to interfere with religious vows. You can only take religious vows when you're 30 years old. You mustn't take, that's the kind of thing a state would vow. And the church, before our crazy age, would say, no, relative youngsters, let's say 18, can definitely make a religious vow for the rest of their life. So, 53, the state should not protect religious institutes, and it may suppress them. In 1905, when the Masons passed as a law the separation of the French church and the state, the church in France and the French state, the religious communities had to flee France to be able to continue. And that's when England picked up a few religious communities and greatly benefited. Conclusion, 54. Kings and princes are above the church in determining jurisdiction. In other words, the state tells the church what to do, and the church doesn't tell the state what to do. Always the same principle. 55, church and state should be separated from one another. The famous, notorious principle of the separation of church and state. No, they should work just like. It's very useful and very normal for the policeman and the priest to work together in the village. So it's very useful and very normal for church and state to work together on the national level. And that's what God wants. God wants church and state to work together. It does not want the priest to get into politics, but it does want the politicians to obey the Ten Commandments, and they must obey the Ten Commandments for the good of all the state, and the priests will tell the politicians, guide them how to obey the Ten Commandments. And that's normal and natural. Union of church and state. 56. We move into natural and Christian ethics, the principles. Neither God nor religion, but matter, facts, numbers, and might. Rotten principles. Application of secularism, the root revolution, nationalism. 56. Laws of morality need no divine or natural backing or sanction. If there is no God, why am I a colonel? Why am I a captain in the army? If there's no God, I'm no captain. The officer in Dostoevsky realizes that his little hierarchy in the army depends upon the much greater hierarchy of all men underneath God. 57. Moral science and laws should come under no religious authority. You don't need God in morality and morals. You do. You do. If there's not God behind morality and morals are flyweight and of no significance, and men will disregard them. You can't fabricate a morality without religion, without God. It won't. It's just a flyweight. It's insignificant. It's a piece of paper that will just get torn to pieces. 58. Only matter matters. And we're back to number 1, which is there's no God, there's no spirit, there's only matter. There's the corollary of number 1. Morality centers only on money and pleasure. All facts are right. Morality centers on success. Duties are nothing. Whatever happens is right. Might is right. 60. Authority arises only from adding up numbers and material forces. That's democracy materialism. Democracy materialism make right and wrong. If the Houses of Parliament pass an abortion law, then it's perfectly okay to abort. No way for us. 61. Right is what succeeds, even if it is unjust. In other words, might is right. There's no such thing as right and wrong outside of my power to do what I want. 62. The applications of these terrible principles. Secularism. The church must not intervene in any questions of right and wrong. Right and wrong are purely secular. 63. It is lawful to disobey legitimate rulers and to rebel. That's the lawfulness of revolution. No. Revolution is not Catholic. 63 is difficult, especially in our age, because today the revolution has triumphed, the Masonic revolution has triumphed, and therefore sanity wants to revolt against the revolution. Sanity is the Archbishop was not a rebel, he was a rebel against rebellion. Things get very complicated in our sick, crazy, revolutionary modern world. Things do get complicated. 64. Love and service of country excuse perjury and excuse any crime against eternal law. In other words, my country, right or wrong. How many of you know the statue of Edith Cavell in London? What's written at the foot of it? Alan, do you remember? Patriotism.
It's not enough.
It's not enough, that's it. That was an upright, surely Protestant nun, not nun, but nursing assistant, who was shot as a spy by the Germans. She was operating as a nurse, I think, over on the continent, and the Germans shot her as a spy. It's a noble figure. Outside to the east, the northeast corner of Trafalgar Square, it's a noble statue. Then there were still some noble English people. Today, you'd have to make a statue of a rock and roll dish rack. Okay, marriage. I said to you, this is the 20th stitch being undone. The key error, Christ never raised marriage to being a sacrament. Christ did raise marriage to be a sacrament in order to really fasten that 20th stitch and to give the marriage strength and tightness against being dissolved, broken up, divorced, and so on. And my goodness, how right he is when you watch the devastation that divorce wreaks in society. And all the popes said, you introduce divorce, you're going to wreck society. And it's exactly what's happening. It's clear. The church knows. The church has got thousands of years, 2,000 years of experience to know these things. The sacrament of marriage lies in the nuptial blessing extrinsic to the contract. That's an interesting point. No. The sacramentality of marriage is not by the priest blessing the marriage at the wedding mass, at the nuptial mass. The sacramentality of marriage is by the fact that the two people are baptized Catholics. If they're two baptized Catholics and they marry, it's bound to be a sacrament, regardless of whether the priest blesses it or not. It's an interesting little technical question, but it shows how the Freemasons are trying to undo. 67. By natural law, marriage is dissoluble. No, 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 no. Even by natural law, regardless of the sacrament of marriage, even by natural law, marriage is not dissoluble. And the state may dissolve it. No. By natural law, marriage is not a sacrament by natural law if the two are not baptized. But even by natural law, two pagans that hook up together in the proper way, in the most solid way that they know how, a pagan man and a pagan woman that join together, it's until death, even without it being sacrament, even without them being Christians. The state alone, and not the church, may impose impediments which absolutely block marriage, like a brother marrying a sister. The church may not impose absolute blockages to marriage, only the state may impose them. Once again, the state above the church. No, the church has, interestingly, a sane church, a sane state, legislating on marriage, ends up legislating very like the church, and will often consult the church for how to make laws on what marriages must be absolutely and by nature intrinsically forbidden. Only the state, 79, ever granted to the church to impede marriages, to set up these blockages. No, 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 no. The church did it with the right given to the life of Jesus Christ. 70. Any Tridentine anathemas to the contrary are not dogmatic, or they are not contrary. In other words, the Council of Trent was that the Masons are denying the right of the Council of Trent to lay down what are and are not impediments to marriage. Again, the state the Masons trying to stop the church making their own laws of marriage. 71. Not Tridentine, but state prescriptions are necessary for marriage validity. Notice all of these errors on marriage. The importance for the Masons to undo marriage, to undo Christian marriage, to undo natural marriage, and the importance for the church to hold together natural marriage and to hold together the sacrament. Because that's the bond which holds together the family, which is like bricks to the wall of society. You can't make a strong wall with crumbling bricks. You can't make a sound state with crumbling families. Marriage is at the heart of the common good of the state, let alone the family. Marriage, 72, being nullified by vows of chastity, started in the Middle Ages. No, no, no. No, the vow of chastity, if you make a vow of chastity, you cannot marry unless you get dispensed from the vow. That's what the church says. So if I try to marry now, tomorrow, I take a woman through some ceremony or other with some nutty priest, it's not going to be valid, because until I live, I get dispensed from the vow of chastity. Christians, and that didn't start in the Middle Ages. The Masons are trying to say, if it started in the Middle Ages, then it can stop now. No, it goes right back to the origins of the church. Christians can marry civilly without it being or having to be a sacrament. There you are. No, if two Christians, if two baptized Catholics marry, it's going to be a sacrament regardless of whether they have a wedding ceremony or not. They should have a wedding ceremony. They definitely should marry in front of a priest. It won't be valid from the Council of Trent. It won't be valid unless they marry in front of a priest. But it's not even the marriage in front of a priest which makes it a sacrament. It's the fact that the two are baptized and are marrying, intending to marry till death do them part. That's what makes it a sacrament. Marriage cases, betrothal cases, come under state jurisdiction. No, they come primarily under church jurisdiction. And lastly, the conclusion. The Pope and the modern world, and these are doozies. Some Catholics don't accept that the spiritual power can also have worldly power. So the Masons are trying to divide and rule. Okay, there are some nutty Catholics who believe that the spiritual power can't have worldly power. But there are also Catholics who believe that the spiritual power can have worldly power. So the Masons are trying to divide and rule. It would be far better if the Holy See gave up its civil authority. No, the Church needs its civil authority, it needs its properties and so on. And the last four are real duties. Today, Catholicism should no longer be a state religion. That's directly contradicted. That was also in Quanta Cura. It's directly contradicted by Vatican II. So it is right for Catholic states to allow public practice of other religions. No. It's only that the state may tolerate the public practice of false religions, where not to tolerate would hinder the salvation of souls. And today that would very often be the case, because if today this Catholic state tried to hinder the public practice of false religions, you'd have so much liberalism amongst the people that they would all protest, oh, that's against liberty, that's against liberty. They would hate the church, and so there would be more harm than good done to the church. In that case, the church, the state could tolerate the public practice of false religions, but only because the people are so corrupt. If the people are not corrupt, then etc. To allow the public practice of non-Catholic religions does not corrupt the people. Stop and think about that one. To allow the public practice of false religions does not corrupt the people. So the Pope is saying it does corrupt. That's an error, therefore it does corrupt the people. To allow the public practice of non-Catholic religions does corrupt the people. Of course, if you believe in the Catholic religion, then you can understand that. But if you don't believe in the Catholic religion, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense.
It's only a limited corruption, my Lord. Very, very limited corruption.
How do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Bishop Kelly, it's only a limited...
Oh, there we are. There we are. You've got it. You've got it. And finally, 80 is a classic. The Pope must move with modern times. He must be progressive and liberal. Error. He's got no need to move with modern times. Okay? And he's got no need to be progressive, and he's got no need to be liberal. He needs to be a man of the truth, of the natural and supernatural truth. He needs to be a man of our Lord Jesus Christ and of the church, and in line with all his predecessors. Let's say a prayer to thank Our Lady for many, many gifts. Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcero, et spes nostra salve, a te clamamus, exules Kyrie, a te suspiramus, gementes et flentes, in ac lacrimarum vale, Elia ergo, advocata nostra, illos tuos, misericordes oculos, ad nos converte. Et Jesum, benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilio ostende. O clemens, O via, O dulcis, Eo Maria. Let me give you a blessing. Benedictus omnipotentis, Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, descendat super vos et manet semper. Amen.